And we're back. It's long and hard. It's episode number 10. I'm Thomas Harrington, and joining me is...
And Josh Blaze. How was it going?
Good. You? What's new with you?
Not too much. Doing a little bit of work here. Home in 2 weeks, so figuring out my life,
Oh, yeah. Reunion tour coming up.
Reunion. Might actually be able to do this in person, which is going to be more difficult than than how we have the setup going so far. So
technically speaking, yeah. I mean, I don't know. We'll figure it out. It'll be fun. It'll be a journey.
We'll contact some camera people out there, and
Yeah. That's actually one thing I've always not been super good at is cameras, right? Just from knowing technology point of view. It's I don't know. Ties back to everything of having a hyper specialized knowledge is valuable, right? So
yeah, it's you can get so deep into that world too. And I mean, there's obviously school programs for it. So
yeah. Now, so what we have today is a little bit of a different format and kind of something we wanted to, try out, play with. We sort of introduced it in a more recent episode, and it's more going to be just open discussion about events, what's going on in the world, news, but specifically what's relevant to, I suppose, anyone who would in theory be interested in our podcast. So stuff that's relevant to small business, relevant to entrepreneurs, relevant to kind of the business world at large, and marketing and all that stuff. And something you need to know about, not just, I don't know, sports or whatever.
You won't hear too much sport talk from me. So, but the Raptors are in the finals. That's pretty cool. I actually might go down to Toronto while we're still here and go stand at Jurassic Park and get a little bit of hype with Drake and all the people over there.
That'd be fun. Is that what they're calling their outside watching place, Jurassic Park?
Jurassic Park, yeah.
That's funny. I don't even I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I've watched the last 3-4 games. I think that's the extent of sports I've watched in 2019. So
that's about 3 or 4 more basketball games than I think I've watched ever. So
it could be exciting when everybody's hyped up about it. But yeah, so this is going to be a little bit more news related, but also more stuff you would see on Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or stuff like that. We're not really going into the Huffington Posts or BuzzFeed or anything like that.
BuzzFeed or anything like that. Yeah.
So,
do you want to intro the first article? You're, I think you're a little more familiar with it.
Okay, sounds good. So I was trolling on CBC today, and there's this article that came up, and it was top of everything, and it was Call Their Bluff, shut down social media platforms, an ex-Facebook advisor urges. And they're talking about how social media has kind of morphed and deranged itself into this where it's a platform for people to kind of not have any privacy anymore. And there's a lot of people that are coming out saying that these platforms don't allow for people to have conversations. There's self-censoring within the platform, and also that there's obviously what's happened with Facebook over the last 6 months to a year with their privacy scandals, their information shipping out the door to third parties and stuff like that. People are kind of coming to a realization that these platforms are not necessarily working in the best interest of the average person that uses them. So yeah, this article is talking about how they should probably shut these social media platforms. I'm pretty sure it's mostly Facebook. They don't really
Facebook appears to be the main target. There's some stuff about Google and Twitter at the end, but it sounds like those guys are being more cooperative, whatever that might mean. But Facebook seems to be the target. And I mean, it really is the main epicenter of the internet when you factor in that. And even for a younger generation who tends toward Instagram, well, guess who owns Instagram, right? So
Yeah. Well, I always laugh when people are like, Facebook isn't cool anymore. I'm on Instagram. I'm like, well, you're still on Facebook's platform, and I mean, if you use WhatsApp, same thing too. So,
right, yeah,
yeah, it's an interesting situation. I get it from both sides. Like, I do understand the argument with regard to privacy and personal data ownership, and then I also see how these companies exist, and they also wouldn't exist if people weren't using them, because essentially they what's the word I'm looking for, exploit the networking effect. So a network is as powerful as the sum of its parts times, like, I actually have to look up the equation. Give me a second here. It's actually a very the network.
Can you check your mic connection on your end, Josh? It's kind of crackling quite a bit for me. I don't know if it's just my internet here or the actual stream, but yeah, no, it's definitely it's a fine line. It's a double-edged sword where, I mean, you can always say it's a private company, right? They can do what they want, but where we're getting to a point where, network some of its parts. Well, if almost everyone on Earth is part of this network, does it become so large that it now requires, like, do we treat it like a utility more like, and same with the internet as a whole, is that more a utility versus private property versus comparing it more to, like, I don't know, water and electricity, right? Where it should be some degree of government regulated. I don't know. There's not really a good answer. And, I think most people know, or if you follow this sort of thing, like, Mark Zuckerberg really doesn't want any regulation, and he gets kind of squirrely about it, especially in his, like, testimonies and stuff, right? So,
yeah, if you watch that one that was last year, it was very interesting to see the divide in his knowledge versus, like, the people that are actually trying to legislate.
Yeah, that actually, I saw some clips of it too, where it was you could tell, whatever member of Congress who was asking the question actually didn't have a very good depth of knowledge of arguably basic, I don't know, technology usage.
Well,
right.
I mean, yeah, exactly. So you're running into a situation where you have the people that are regulating this stuff don't even understand it, and you can't really do that, I guess. I think that the internet in its first conception was a place for kind of freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of the ability to transmit information and share. And in creating a platform, you do control some of that. And it's not necessarily a good thing because of humans are fallible unto themselves. So having somebody in control of the information that's being transmitted and determining what is good and bad, what can be said and what can't be said, I'm not all for it, I suppose. I also see the flip side of the coin too, where, you have organizations of people that are, using the platforms as a way to do bad things in the world, and that's not.
I think even more that always comes back as an issue here, where they talk about quote unquote misinformation, particularly in, let's say, election times or whatever, and then, or generally just talks about kind of misreporting or false reports or whatever, just because unfortunately we have such a clickbaity culture that it kind of begets that, right? And I think because most people don't like every day-to-day consumer, like, your data is valuable to marketers and stuff, but is it inherently that valuable? Like, not really. Like, get over yourself. Same for me, right? Like, am I really talking about, nuclear secrets every single day? No, but it does feel kind of like violates your personal space, personal privacy too, right? And I think, to tie it back to our world is where advertisers come into it, right? Because
Mhm.
I mean, if there's a good product out there, advertise it to me, and if I like it, I'll buy it. And there's something to retargeting, right? Like that's very, very valuable. And then even people get kind of in a lather about that, I find, right? Like just getting a simple banner retargeting ad or a Facebook retargeting ad, and they're like, whoa, what's going on?
Yeah,
Right.
like it's
So
black magic or something, which
yeah,
is
and where's the line? And it talks about here where because supposedly, you know, having a cookie in your browser isn't that big of a deal, but supposedly Facebook actually tracks your activity outside of the app and then starts like reading and scanning your emails and stuff.
mm,
That's probably a line that shouldn't be
see,
crossed. And then,
that's verging on. Yeah, like I mean,
yeah.
there's also purchasing of like location data and stuff that's just like it gets to a point of you're getting a little bit 1984ish, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it's like, why do you need my location at all hours of the day? Like,
hmm
I'm not that interesting of a person, I suppose. But
That is true. I mean, maybe there's a fine line, and maybe there's an opportunity here for someone to come in and create something similar to a VPN where you can block how much they're allowed to follow you, right? Or kind of a third party thing. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, like I
Yeah.
have on my browsers, I have a lot of ad blockers and stuff. I don't even get YouTube ads on most of my browsers because
Do those work?
yeah, they do. Like,
So when you're
set it
because
all up.
when I'm looking at this news article, like on the top, I have like a Google banner ad, like
Mhm.
whatever, not the end of the world. Like, would yours block even that as well?
Generally, yeah,
Oh, really? Interesting.
yeah. Websites don't like you because
What
that's
about
their ad revenue, but
yeah, exactly. What about Facebook? Like, can you block native ads in the newsfeed or no?
no, you can. There's plugins that you can actually kill your entire newsfeed, which I have done because I don't use Facebook for scrolling endlessly. But
Yeah.
yeah, you can
Okay.
actually
Yeah.
completely nuke your newsfeed. But I mean, that kind of begets the purpose
Mhm.
of Facebook
Yeah.
that people use it for to
Yeah.
look at what everybody else is doing.
I mean, looking at this, would because it says Sri Lanka here shut down Facebook at one point, and would we ever see this in North America? Probably not, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think, excuse me, too many people would lose their minds first of all, and that's probably just a dramatic um, end of things. And if for the government to step into that, like we're straying a little too much into political territory, but that would be kind of stepping over a boundary as well, right? But it would be something where, if they shut down social media tomorrow as a small business, you're pretty much screwed because, as we've talked about here, that's pretty much the only or effectively the only channel you're really using. Or when you think about it, like everything you use is kind of social media, even though it's different websites or platforms, right?
There's a very interesting development that's coming from the original creator of the internet, Tim Berners-Lee, Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He's actually knighted. And he's looking to create some sort of secondary alternate internet and where everybody controls their own data and you get to essentially plug into networks what you're willing to share with them and then pull it back out at the end of your use. It's a very interesting concept. I'd urge everybody listening to go read into a little bit more of that. But
Yeah, I got it. I got his name here. I'll put a name in the notes. I've actually never heard of this guy. I didn't really know like the World Wide Web had a definitive inventor at one time here. So
yeah, I'm just gonna fact check myself here, but he used to work at, I want to say it was MIT or something.
yeah.
He's taking like a complete sabbatical from his professor job, and he's going on to create something called Solid. So do a little bit of research on that and look into
That's
that.
interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I would, that's interesting. We'll see how that kind of develops. I mean, on that note, and just to kind of contradict here for practical advice, and I heard this on another show the other day where people were talking about best online networks for, well, anyone trying to spread any kind of message. And it's like, well, should you use the, there's more, or well, lesser known kind of tertiary networks. What are they like? I think one's called Rockfin or something like that. There's
Rockfin, yeah.
Rockfin. There's is it Gab is kind of like Twitter, and then there's also Mega. It's like I think it's just called Minds or something like that. Do you know which one I'm talking about? Yeah,
I'm not familiar with that one. The other two I have a little bit of understanding about, but
anyways, those are ones where it's like, well, should you go to those ones that are pure privacy and blah, 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 and kind of, let's call it a more libertarian view? Well, I would say no, because there's not a lot of people on there. And that's just kind of where people who have nowhere else left to go that have been kicked off everything else go, right? So unfortunately, you know what? If you're trying to put your message out there, you're going to have to sell your soul a little bit to Mark Zuckerberg for the time being, right?
Yeah, and I mean, nothing is ever set in stone. Look at how MySpace was overtaken, and I mean, you never know what's going to be going on in the next 5 years.
That's a good point. And I mean, even think about it this way, because at one point in time in 1999 or 2000 or 2001, and you're like, oh yeah, if we went back in time and we're like, yeah, you know what, MySpace, it'll be gone in 2 years. Don't spend too much time on it. People would be like, are you insane? Like, it's MySpace. Everyone has MySpace, right? So if you find yourself saying the same thing about Facebook, I guess you truly never know. Granted, when 1/3 of the Earth's population is on there, maybe we're in a different game now, but
yeah, I mean, Nexopia back in the day, that was the other one too.
Yeah, hey, that's a shout out for our Canadian and even like Edmonton fans.
I mean,
I do think it was a Edmonton company for some reason.
You may be right. I actually don't have.
Did you know it still exists? They actually popped up on my Instagram the other day, which was the weirdest thing. And I think it's still a forum. I have no idea, but their Instagram had like 1,800 followers or something like that. And you're like,
killer.
Oh shit, how the mighty have fallen. So
yeah, I mean, you and I run bigger Instagram accounts now, so
yeah, exactly. Look out, Nexopia. You know, I actually I remember Gary Vee saying once upon a time that he wanted down the road to buy because a lot of those web properties still exist. Like I think MySpace. Yeah, let me just look it up. See what happens.
It actually is like it's still a thing. It does.
Yeah, like it's still out there. Nexopia still technically exists. Something that there's a lot of other smaller ones where, you know, once it kind of is just down to the smoldering embers, you go in and you buy that network site and bring it back. So then all the people who are like in their 30s or whatever are like, oh shit, MySpace, that was the best thing ever. And then they get back on it, sort of thing.
Well, it's like at one point MySpace was growing at, oh man, I was watching a video on this the other day for some reason. And it was
really?
Like 300,000 users per day or something pretty insane. And essentially the reason that MySpace collapsed was just a comedy of errors within their own organization. Like really? they were the network, and then Facebook came along, and when you actually look at like the usership, MySpace was tremendously bigger than Facebook, and then all of a sudden just Facebook went with users. So there's a lot of things that they did wrong. We can include there's a YouTube video I'll include in the show notes to go watch if you're interested in the fall of grace for MySpace.
That is intriguing. I might check that out. You want to move on here? Should we go just next to right down the list here?
Yeah, let's do the next one.
Actually, I kind of like this one because this comes back to or we can at least tie this into a story of ourselves. But
Mhm.
so Amazon, the title of the article is "In Huge Strategy Shift, Amazon is set to purge many small suppliers." So according to this, basically Amazon currently gets a lot of its smaller convenience items, or a lot of its items, from small businesses, local businesses, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and now for day-to-day items, well, they're a lot of their wholesale purchases from large brands like Procter and Gamble, Sony, Lego, and their must-have merchandise just to directly compete with Target and Walmart. Which is interesting because now I see Walmart making a push to like some more online shopping and stuff that I don't know, I've seen ads kicking around.
Yeah. They bought Jet.com 2 years ago, I want to say. And Jet.com was like the next Amazon. So they were really investing in their online stuff.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you there. Keep going.
No, that frankly, that was kind of my understanding here, or that it's basically talking about how this is really going to hurt a lot of small businesses who kind of counted on it. Now, I think this is kind of a two-factor thing where it's because a lot of these small businesses were a supplier for Amazon, meaning they would sell directly to them at wholesale cost, and then Amazon would go resell. But
Yep.
then it's probably also going to hurt a lot of businesses who just sell directly on Amazon, and that's their one channel, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, you shouldn't ever have only one channel of sale ever. Um, yeah, what you were saying about is essentially the fulfillment by Amazon, where people aren't super familiar with that. But like, I mean, if you see anything that's Prime, it's usually fulfilled by Amazon. So you have me as a supplier shipping my goods into an Amazon warehouse, and then they fire them out from the Amazon warehouse to you in 2 days or less. So I think it was for everybody that's under $10 million in annual revenue on Amazon is going to be kind of shafted by this,
Oh, really? Wow.
which is a lot of people. Like,
Yeah, that's going to be a lot, right? So
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Well, I think the bigger takeaway here for like a practical small business point of view is exactly what you said, is you really shouldn't be relying on one channel of sales, especially not a third party one where it's Amazon, where they can shut you down tomorrow and you're done. You make $0, right? So, and we've even read like horror stories in the kind of like, let's call it e-commerce forums, or this e-commerce corner of the internet, where, yeah, guys were doing like 10 grand a month, 100 grand a month, whatever, all via Amazon. And then they somehow broke some rule and are banned. And then they're totally screwed, right?
Well, you don't also realize that you don't hold the customer list when you sell on Amazon, and this is huge. You don't get to know who your customers are. You don't get an email, you don't get a phone number. I mean, sometimes you don't even get like a last name or anything like that. So you don't even know who you're selling to, and you can't build some sort of second touch. Like, I mean, in a funnel, in building a sales funnel, you need that information to be able to continue to market products and build your brand.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon gets all that information. You get none of that information. So,
Yeah, well, just to kind of contradict our last points on this, on the last article, but it does tie together a little bit with the privacy thing, right? Where, who would you rather have your information to follow up, like a nice small business where you've found their specific niche product that you needed, and then whatever, maybe they sent some email drips, you unsubscribe anyways. But that's actually a very good point, where, yeah, you as a business owner, like, you don't own the customer list and Amazon does, right? Because I get follow-up emails from Amazon on stuff I bought where it was fulfilled by someone else, right?
yeah. And on top of that, I mean, I've seen a lot of smaller, specifically authors, completely axe anything on Amazon, specifically for Kindle, but it just doesn't make sense for a lot of them.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. I mean, I think our message here would be, and this is probably the general knowledge out there, is you always want to own your, well, means of production. You always want to own your channels. You want to own even your content, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you should be always driving sales back to your own website. Can you use FBA, Fulfillment by Amazon, as one tool, one channel? Yeah, no problem, right? But you really should be focusing on it yourself, because like a website in itself is kind of the last true free medium of the internet, right? Where you own the domain. Even if you're selling like a controversial product or whatever, no one can really take that domain away from you. Facebook cannot allow your ads. Instagram can stop your ads. YouTube can stop your ads. Google can stop your ads. But there's still other ways around. But the website is still there. It still exists.
Yeah, I'm shaking my head in agreement here for all of you listening. But two things I wanted to add to that is that, first of all, if you sell anything that's like generic and it takes off on Amazon, they're going to copy you and produce a lower cost version of it. And if you're selling anything like, I mean, they have their own range of like computer mice and monitors and all this shit that they're coming out with now. Like, it's not very good quality stuff, but they are just trying to compete with people that are putting out like generic products that people don't care necessarily about the brand. And that segues into my second point about selling on some sort of other channel. It's very difficult to build a brand around a product or a company when you're selling it on these external channels. So if you're starting a clothing brand,
shameless self plug.
Yeah, don't be selling it on a third party until you're way beyond brand recognition. I mean, Nike can sell on Amazon, but you probably cannot be selling on Amazon.
Yeah. Even something like where, like if it's more of a, let's call it like a trinket or something, or like a item where they just need the functionality of it. Like you're buying a flashlight. Do people have brand loyalty for flashlights?
No.
Probably not really. But if you're trying to build that, like people just need the item. Like there's no checkout, there's no personalization, there's no options for you to, I mean, frankly, I guess upsell, right? Too, as a business owner.
Yeah, I have like a personal notion that I see that there's some steps that they're going in that's not the correct way for them to be taking their marketplace. But I mean, you
in
know,
what way?
on there?
Like they're stepping in too much, or you just disagree with how they do it, or what?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're competing directly with your wholesalers, I guess, right? So you're when you start stepping on the toes of people that like Duracell, for example, for batteries, I mean, why would you even sell on Amazon? You're not going to get the preferential treatment because Amazon's going to be pushing their product to the top of the sale list whenever somebody searches for batteries or whatever.
Right. So Duracell could make their own, well, I mean, just online shopping channel, right? But I think I see where you're going with that. And, another good analogy would be, let's look at Netflix, right? So now on-demand streaming is such a big thing that a lot of like production companies are making their own streaming services, right? So the biggest one as of recent is Disney, right? Because Disney owns so many properties, not just kid shows, and they've now pulled all of those off of Netflix, and now Disney Go, or whatever the hell it's calling, is coming out relatively soon. Which you could see. Would you see a lot of larger brands pulling away from Amazon feasibly? I don't know. It depends how much they're in their pocket, and like you said, kind of start competing with their own in-house products.
Yeah, you're at the mercy of these platforms. The same thing with Google. Like, I mean, a lot of media companies over the past 5 years have been just absolutely obliterated once algorithm shifts happened in Facebook, when they started going from, first they went from chronological, then they went to interest, and then they went based on your friend group as opposed to your pages and stuff. And I mean, you can even see it based on pages in Facebook now. They hardly get any views compared to a native post that you would make on your own wall.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you're at the mercy of these companies. And
I think that's actually a really good point. So regardless of whatever channel you're going about building your personal brand, is LinkedIn, Facebook, Amazon, Google, shopping, postcards, maybe not that. That's probably not exactly you're at the mercy of it. But when you're using other networks and other people's stuff to put your message out there, yeah, you are at the mercy of it. And in all things, so if you're selling e-commerce, you need to be driving traffic from multiple channels. Any other kind of thing where you're using social media marketing, you really shouldn't become too invested in one, right? You are at their mercy. And, a lot of the conventional, not so conventional wisdom out there, whatever, is the more you look into Shopify gurus and stuff, pretty much all of them are anti-fulfillment by Amazon, as far as I know, unless they're really far along and then they just don't want to deal with shipping or hitting certain markets or whatever, right? And then even now with this new change, they'll probably step away from that for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's other fulfillment services. There's other advertising networks too. Like, I mean, we won't talk about them, but I mean, Google's huge, but there are other advertising networks to get your message out there too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Understatement of the day. Google's huge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, unfortunately, some algorithm changes. Well, even I heard a thing recently talking about niche blogs, because niche blogs used to be more of a thing, and now it's very hard to organically
to rank
reach on that, right? And rank.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I don't know. The world is constantly changing, so you obviously got to adapt, or you go and start those platforms yourself.
Yeah, that's option number 2, right? So
yeah, go be the next Jeff Bezos and take the Mackenzie Bezos pledge and give away half your wealth that you acquired from divorcing your ex-husband. Did you see that today?
No, I didn't. So she signed like the giving pledge or something like that?
Yeah, she signed the giving pledge to give away half her worth or her net worth when she passes away.
So interesting. I mean, that's a good thing, right? So
I would say so. I mean, she was going to probably do it at the end of the day, whether she stayed married or not. But I find it a little bit ironic / hilarious. So, let's move on to the next topic: the iBuyer market in real estate. This one is very close to home for both of us. So, for those of you not familiar with iBuyers, it's a trend that's coming up in specifically the US, but I'm sure it'll be coming up in Canada too. And how people are going to these large real estate tech companies. And if you want to sell your house and you're in kind of a rush, these companies will provide you with an offer to purchase your house directly. Then what they'll do is they'll generally fix up your house and flip it to the open market for some sort of profit for them. Zillow is a very big one in the States. Obviously, the biggest real estate platform network in the States. Opendoor, OfferPad, and they stay Redfin. I'm not super familiar with Redfin being in iBuyer, but maybe they're moving into that direction. In the States?
I think they're just mentioning them here specifically as an example of like a tech startup. I'm quite sure Redfin doesn't do iBuyer.
Yeah. So it's an interesting business model. You and I have had much discussion about this privately, but I guess we'll talk a little bit about it on here.
Yeah.
The most hilarious part of the entire article, it's a Zero Hedge article, but Steve Eisman, who is essentially the guy who shorted the market in 2008 and made a shit ton of money, is shorting Zillow because he thinks that the business model is very, very questionable, and they're moving away from their core competency to move into something that's a far more high risk and also holding of inventory, especially that's subject to the forces of market. So
Mhm. Just for the folks at home, so uh, the character Steve Carell played in The Big Short is most closely based on Steve Eisman, just for the
yeah,
record.
yeah. So I mean, he knows his shit. So, and I personally think it's a very interesting business model, but I think that it's very market specific in that you would be going into buyer markets. Yes, buyer markets where it's tougher to sell
Yes.
properties. I had to think there for a second.
Hmm.
Where it's tougher to sell properties for the sellers, and you're going to have a little bit more desperation from the sell side. So introducing another channel of purchase is something to think about. I I don't know. Like if I was selling my house personally and I was offered X amount of dollars and I knew that the company would be making a profit on me at the end of the day, I probably wouldn't sell it to them. But that's just me. Um, and I'm sure there's people in dire straits that do need to use this, but I don't know. It's as holding a house's inventory is a lot of money that's tied up in a piece of, well, it's an
Highly
illiquid
illiquid asset
asset
for
to
sure.
begin with.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, the flipping business in theory can make sense. I mean, people have made money from it. If anyone's going to get into it, not Joe and Sally down the street, maybe don't go flip a home for the first time, right? But like if
mhm.
a big company wants to do it, sure, maybe they have the deeper pockets. But uh, for me, yeah, it's interesting to hear kind of more the Wall Street take on it, where it appears risky to them because yeah, now they're taking on physical inventory of like huge things. There's a lot of disposal cost, and like you said, it's a liquid, right? So yeah, that's interesting that they're shorting Zillow, which is hilarious, but it also makes a lot of sense, right? And um, you know, sometimes like flipping a home is very challenging, right? Because there's a lot of okay, now you're carrying new inventory. Now you have a whole bunch of construction costs. It always goes over. You have your disposal costs, aka commissions and closing costs.
Mhm.
And if the market dips down a little bit, there's a very real chance you won't make any money on your flip, right?
Oh, I
So
mean, I could see them getting absolutely fucked, to be
mhm,
honest. Like
definitely.
holding a big inventory and a market shift. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now, exactly, and from an agent point of view, and you said this right. So when you go in and read the fine print on Open Door or whatever, the the total fees and margin and stuff, because I think they charge a fee what on when you sell it to them too or whatever. It's like 10% or something, right? So in America, the real estate commissions are significantly higher than in Canada for the most part. They're average around 6%, and in Canada, it's more around 4%, right? If not less, like 3 to 4
Mhm.
is my understanding nationwide. Um,
Real
but
estate commissions are negotiable. It depends on the market you're in. Blah, 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 blah.
just talk really fast, like those guys at the end of medical commercials. Side effects may include.
You may die, but
Yeah, yeah. But
take our drug.
like you said, it's well, for one, really, yeah, you need an almost more motivated seller. And there's actually an article because I believe there's a company in Calgary that is technically an iBuyer company, but it only has a few funders, so it's a smaller operation. And then some seller who had sat on the market for a while, hadn't sold, hadn't gotten a good price, um, decided to take their offer, and he was quite open about that he was selling for less than what in theory is the market value, and the numbers made sense. I even thought he could get it was something like he was listed at 380 and was taking like 330, 340. He probably
Mhm.
could have sold for like 360 based on what I saw in that area. I'm not a Calgary agent, but speaking off the cuff.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a scenario where he's like, yeah, I know I'm taking a hit, but we need to move. And it's been a frustrating year sitting on the market. Uh, I'm just going to take less to be out of it. And this business model it requires you, like, you have to win on both sides of the equation of a flip, especially on the buy. That's where it makes or breaks you, right? Like you need to get a good deal on the home you're going to flip, right? And then you have to sell for top dollar in theory as well, right? So you have to win both times there. And then you do need to have a motivated seller who's willing to accept that, right? And you and I know very well that, Josh, how often are sellers willing to take a couple dollars less for their home?
My God, I've had negotiations fall apart over $100. So I mean,
yeah. So it's something where I just don't think it'll catch wind like a lot, or catch as much fire, or get as universally accepted as some people might think it will. The whole iBuyer thing. Will it be like? Is it a good idea for a larger firm to enter the space? Well, the economics make more sense. Will it be revolutionary, breaking business model that will flip the real estate industry on its head? No, it'll kind of just be another option that's out there, right?
It's one thing that I kind of get frustrated about with tech companies and everything, about how we're disrupting this industry. This fucking thing has existed from day one, where people would you would go around the neighborhood and canvass a neighborhood and say, I will buy your house for X dollars. Let me buy it. Let me get the contract. Let me flip the contract on the market to somebody else, and I'll make my 10 grand or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, they're just doing it at a bigger scale at this point. And the thing that you said about the both sides of the transaction is really good. They're going to win on the buy because, I mean, they have the data. However, I just see it on the sell side of them holding 1,000 or 10,000 homes and a market shift coming, and just the exposure is.
Actually, that's a really good point when you look at it on scale like that. And like, let's look in more local in our market. Like, that would even be like comparing to like a new home builder where they'll have 10,000 quick possession units, like active units listed.
Yep.
For
There's been
sale.
a fuck ton. I'll just add an addendum to that. There's been a fuck ton of home builders in Alberta that have closed up shop because of exactly this phenomenon.
Even larger ones, right? So when you have all this inventory and it takes a 2 to 3 to 4% dip, and then when you're in the resale market of a flipped property, you're going to get completely hosed, right? So in a perfect world, and what I've read on some of the other stuff on Open Door, in theory, they're looking for more a home that just shows poorly because the people are messy as hell or whatever, and the place is just fucking gross. So you buy it super cheap from them, get them out of there, and then just, do an ozone treatment so it doesn't smell like smoke or whatever, paint it, freshen it up, and make money there on the margin just because you got such a smoking deal on the buy. Again, it's very hyper-specific situations is the problem. And, you were even touching on it a bit there, but I've said from the first time I read about iBuyer, to me, these are those we buy houses for cash signs.
Yeah.
That's the number 4 with a tech spin, right? Drive around Edmonton, you'll see them on the little shoulders of the road on meridians, and there'll be a little yellow sign.
Yeah.
With like black Sharpie, right? And it's like, we buy houses for cash. And usually those are looking for people who are in kind of dire situations, will do a quick deal, need to sell, willing to accept less money if it means they're buying for cash today. And then some of those companies are even like you just said, in an assignment scenario too, where you're selling the contract, not the home or whatever.
Yeah.
It's, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And I just think those we buy houses cash signs is the equivalent of this with, tech startup Silicon Valley kind of putting their trendy, glass windows in the office or, glass cubicles spin on it, slides down to the conference room kind of spin on it. Right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And I wouldn't be a shareholder personally. Like, I'm not giving financial advice here, but I wouldn't be a shareholder just because of the fact that the shareholder is going to be the one that's left holding the bag when shit hits the fan. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It almost seems inevitable, right? Like if one property they break even on or only make like $1,000 or whatever, that's fine. But then when it's hundreds and thousands of them,
Dude, I was reading an article. They were losing $109,000 a house.
I do believe that though, when we looked into it, was something to do with all their marketing costs too, right?
Yeah. But
Now, and the reason I was thinking about iBuyers the other day is I was kind of thinking to myself, and I was kind of talking to another agent, a newer agent, right? So there's always news about how the real estate industry is being flipped on its head, right? Since, the first kind of low fee company came out in like the 2000s or whatever. So your real competition, it's not these new iBuyer platforms. It's not sell by owner companies. It's not new tech giants. It's not new trendy lean startup style new brokerages. Like your competition is really yourself and how much you think about all these other things too, right? And something like iBuyer, where there's a lot of news about it. Well, when you dig deeper into it, it's like it truly is not. Will it become more of a business model and kind of continue to stay around and be more of a thing that people know about? Yes. But then as it gets more widespread knowledge, people will know, oh, okay, yeah, you can go to that, but I'm going to take a 15% hit on my home value, right? So
it's a solution to fill a niche.
That's exactly what it is, right? So, and then even, and then where I'm going with this point compared to, for iBuyers to hit a new market, they have to spend hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on marketing, and then basically operate at a loss for a few years. And then sometimes they don't even turn it around. And then the same goes for sell by owner companies, right? So we saw Purple Bricks recently exited Australia, right? After being there for only about 2 years, didn't get much traction. They recently entered Canada. I haven't really looked at any like numbers or earnings reports or whatever, but those companies have to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars to stay afloat. And then they to basically break even, or if they do end up making money, again, it just costs so much money. It takes a lot of work for them to be there. They're not your real competition because they're really only like 3% market share. iBuyer will probably be like 0.5% market share, right? Down the road. For you as an agent, or like your competition is yourself, right? And just kind of the meta of that. And one thing we talk about and one thing we see locally in our market is there is a Facebook group of realtors in Edmonton who kind of have open discussions. Sometimes there's useful stuff in there, news, people discussing situations, or kind of, if you have a hot pocket listing, whatever, some great stuff. But there's a lot of complaining about one of the largest sell by owner companies in our market who own like 2% market share, right? So what's everyone else doing? Like, why are you spending so much time thinking about that? And just understanding that business model, as well as the iBuyer one, is one where it costs a lot of money to get going. That's why it does have to be the tech startups, I guess, funding it, right? So
yeah, very true. I will let you introduce the next one, I guess. I think, are we going to just do the one more?
Yeah, we should probably do one more.
Okay.
I'm going to gloss over this article because I thought it was kind of funny and slightly interesting. Is there's just more Huawei bans, like the Chinese smartphone. So I've said this for a while. Josh probably has too. And apparently it was interesting. Their networking devices, so like for building actual computer networks, have been banned in like Canada and the US for like 7 years or something like that. And then they still tried to market their smartphones. But anyways, don't buy a Huawei phone.
Yeah. I think that there's definitely some, it goes back to our first point, but there's definitely some informational transfer, I think, that's going back. Don't quote me on that, but I think that there's definitely some questions that you would want to be asking about that. So, and Google's decision not to work with them and to kind of make them use an older version of Android is kind of telling as well. So
yeah, that's quite interesting. Well, it's one of those things where, and it's not like I do this, but reading the terms and conditions of your devices and stuff, no one does it. But like, you're signing off on some pretty bad things, like everything, especially let's backpedal to like these Facebook things that are coming up in privacy and yada, yada, yada. Every single user on Facebook signed off and approved those. They just didn't actually read the thing, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep. I mean, your Android smartphone, like, I mean, your Google services and everything, like, you can get what is the word I'm looking for?
subpoenaed.
Subpoenaed. There we go. You get subpoenaed by the cops for your location based on your smartphone. Were you ever in a situation that would come up? And I mean, I don't need to worry about that, but there are probably people out there that need to worry about that. So, I mean, you give that away when you do use these devices.
Yes. Where were you on May 25th, 2019? Well, according to my VPN, I was in Amsterdam and then New York City within 2 hours of each other. So
yeah, I was in Africa where the Wi-Fi is really good.
Anyway, there was an interesting story about that. Were we talking about this, or was I talking about this with someone else? Where there was a guy who was actually wrongly convicted of murder, and he was supposedly at a baseball game, but within the proximity of the stadium, there was a murder at the same time. So his cell phone showed that he was in that area at that time, and I guess he matched the description, whatever. And then he was actually arrested and was being tried. And then he remembered that they were filming something that day. Like there were a bunch of cameras everywhere, camera crews during the game. And he was trying to figure out what it was. And then someone realized that they were filming an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm that day. And then so they actually used a clip from Curb Your Enthusiasm as evidence, because you could see him in the background of the show, clearly sitting there just watching the baseball game. So Curb Your Enthusiasm out there saving lives. Anyways.
Well, I think it has to do with the location of the cell tower or whatever. Like they can't obviously pinpoint you to, well, I mean, they can triangulate.
They can triangulate, right? So
yeah. I mean,
yeah. So moving on. So in other news here, we got Texas reintroduces cursive handwriting into their school program. And we're old enough to remember that being a thing. Like I think it was like grade 3 or so, where it's like you got to do handwriting, got to do cursive handwriting. It was always kind of a secondary thing. And then I guess it's not really a thing in school anymore. I have no idea. I just assumed. But now they're reintroducing it. And the evidence they give in this article is because supposedly, what the hell is it linked to here? It's linked to a bunch of stuff with helping you learn better is when you write cursively specifically.
As opposed to like just printing?
Well, hang on, let me read it here. So I think that's where there's kind of a misstep, or where they're kind of misusing the information here, where apparently cursive writing, it does it just says there's a correlation between handwriting and memory. And I believe this study is showing that just means writing something down, which is actually true, and which is advice I would give people, is that it is good to write down things, right? Like even if you scribble, like you're like, oh shit, I need to call back Josh later. If you write call back Josh on the back of a napkin and then forget it at the restaurant, you are more likely to remember it because you've written it down, right?
Yeah.
I don't believe this is specific to handwriting in either way. Like to me, this felt like kind of a weird misstep, right? So we're kind of like tech focused here. The AI overlords are coming, and then we're going to encourage kids, rather than improve their typing, improve their, I don't know, usage of X, Y, and Z, is make them write cursively. Like I could see maybe the point of so they don't totally lose it. Because for me, like I only ever write like jotting down notes, and I had terrible handwriting growing up, and now it's gotten worse just because I always use a computer.
God, man.
You'd probably attest to the same, but
yeah, I can't even read anymore.
It's kind of that thing where it appears to be traditionalism in education versus practical new school ways of thinking. I don't know. I just saw this come up in my newsfeed. It was a older person who shared it, right? And then it kind of made me think that there's to me it the one thing I thought of was when Elon Musk was on, I believe it was on Joe Rogan, where he was talking about the way we interact with technology is actually slowing down on most day-to-day usage. And what he meant by that was because mobile usage is so high now, most of the times we're using 2 thumbs to interact with our technology versus 10 fingers, right?
Yeah.
Which is in theory about, I mean, some people can text really fast, but it's 1/5 of the inputs, right? So we're actually slowing it down. And to me, I don't know, I just kind of thought of that quote when I read this headline.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I do like my handwriting, but at the same time, I haven't wrote with a pen in the past 2 or 3 months. So, like,
Really?
you actually like do
That's
lose
impressive.
it.
Yeah.
Like I've been doing my like to-dos and stuff like all on the computer, and I mean,
Haven't set pen to paper in a while. Hey, that's funny.
yeah, it's like more organized, but it's like also when I go to write now, it's just terrible. So
Yeah. Now, to that point, I will contradict myself here with something very useful for everyone, whether you're starting a business or not, is actually writing things down is very good for memory. And from like a psychology point of view, it makes things real, right? Like you're making your thought into something that exists, which is words on a page. So that's kind of why they say writing down goals is good for you. Writing down your plan is good for you. Writing down your to-do lists is good for you. I don't know, nothing but the best practical advice for your life and business here at Long and Hard.
yeah, I think that there's definitely something to be said about it. Maybe that's why my attention span is so much worse than it used to be, but that also probably correlates with social media usage and that sort of thing too. So,
yeah. Yeah. So I don't know that it seemed like a weird thing to be doing in the news when in theory schools are going more like iPads in the classrooms and stuff. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's bad. I guess we'll see. Maybe we'll learn to handwrite so robots can't read it and recognize it. So we as humans in the revolution can communicate with handwritten notes.
I was going to say my cursive writing, like no 2 characters ever look the same. So I mean, you would never be able to throw a recognition algorithm on that one for sure. So,
oh, maybe there's something to that.
I'll add to the point that you were talking about with the iPads and stuff. Like, there's actually like a race for the classroom between like these big companies, Google, Apple. I think specifically those 2, but they're trying to get their products into these elementary schools so that there's a brand loyalty as you get older.
That's funny. Yeah.
To use your Chromebook or use your iPad or whatever it is.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Or even to get into school and establish yourself as like the school platform for whatever it is, like the tech, right? So
yeah, I think you know Chromebooks a lot.
Yeah, because if a school needs 300 computers or whatever, or a school district needs 20,000 or whatever, like that's big business too, right?
True enough. Yeah.
I just remember when the smart boards came out, which when we were in high school, and like not every room had them.
Yeah. I mean,
and they were like, in the hindsight, those were like the clunkiest freaking technologies ever. Those were hilarious.
Yeah, they were. I was going to say they were not very good, but
yeah. Be curious to see what they got now, really. So
yeah, it's something that I haven't stepped foot in a classroom since
no.
I mean, university, but
yeah,
to see what like the elementary is like now would be interesting. Just to think of the amount of paper that we used though back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And going like more paperless. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's and now even like because I'm still someone who writes things down, but when I see huge stacks of paper, I just like kind of cringe, honestly. Like,
yeah, man.
So disorganized.
Well, I mean, like as a paperless brokerage back in the day, and I mean that's pretty much how I run the shop now too. Is that it's like, why would you have file folders and cabinets of
That's the company I'm at now. We're as a whole, they're kind of at a transition. Like I've always done it pretty much entirely paperless. As a whole, they are a little
They're trying to move in that direction.
Trying to move, but I don't know. It's not going perfectly for sure. There's a lot of file folders around. Or even because you and I, we use Google Drive so heavily, and when we had our brokerage, we did the same. Granted, I'm assuming my company has years and years of files to back up, but he does have like stacks of like servers and stuff too in the back for storing digitally. So anyways, it's a good thing to have, but there is definitely something to be said about writing physically. I might actually start doing that a little bit more, because you bring up a good point of specifically for your goals and your to-do lists and stuff. Like actually just physically crossing it off does feel good when you're actually doing stuff, as opposed to just deleting it in your file on your computer. Yeah, there's actually and that's kind of something for a different day, but completing a task does in fact like it releases chemicals in your brain. You feel like you did something, and there's ways to leverage that, and I kind of have some plans for that on a different or upcoming episode here, but we'll get to that in time.
Cool, sounds good. I don't think I have anything else for the articles we wanted to talk about.
No, that's about it for what we had here today. That was kind of our topic for you. We wanted to change it up a little bit rather than just lecture, and kind of explore some new stuff, and see where these things go as well, right?
Yeah, give our opinions on what's happening in the old world.
All right, well, that's about it for us. We didn't have any good marketing for our next segment we wrote down here, did we?
No, I didn't find any. No good marketing in the world the week of May 27th.
Yeah, so check back next week to see if there's good ads out there or not.
You know what? That's actually a lie. There's a thing that's coming out for there's a thing in Montreal called P1. Give me a second to look this up. In Montreal, it's like they're doing like a pyramid in the middle of the city, and they do it in different cities all over the world. This year it's in Montreal. Next year it's
like Egyptian pyramid.
Oh, like a pyramid where they do. Yeah, here I'll send you the link. But it's PY1. Yeah, it's like this. They do like multimedia shows and all this stuff. It was a YouTube ad the other day that I came across. It was just very well done. So I'll have to add that to the show notes for this. But
so, I'm looking at this now. So basically, it's like a light show. Is that right?
Yeah, like a light show, and they also do like electronic music shows from local artists throughout the entire summer. So it's the whole summer, and then they're moving to, I want to say like Madrid or something next year. They do it in a different city every year. Yeah, it's super weird, but
and it's like step into the future venture. Okay, this is intriguing actually.
Yeah, might.
Is there a reason of it, or is it just to be like a cool, trendy?
Just a cool, trendy trip. Take some acid without taking acid. It looks like.
So, this is kind of intriguing, actually.
Yeah, I'm going to look a little bit more into it. But the advertisement on YouTube was really good. It actually caught my eye. It's the first advertisement I've watched all the way through, and it was like a minute long. So good for them.
It's not like, pretty much all my YouTube ads these days are like, if you have 5 minutes, I'll tell you how I sold coffee mugs and made $4 billion on Amazon or whatever, right? And all those e-commerce training ones and stuff. And like, it was cool.
They all start off with like, don't skip this video.
And then the video is like 13 minutes long. And you're like, God damn it. Those are funny, actually, man. Like there's a lot of, that's a thing too. And I would say, I remember when we were kids, we were a little too young to actually see these ads on TV, but there was a really great comic I used to read all the time, and they would make fun of the like it was a family, right? And the dad, they would kind of make fun of him because the dad would always reach back in the day. There were infomercials talking about how to get rich. So you would send in money. They would send you your book on how to get rich. And the book would basically be like, write a book about how to get rich, sell it for $100, sell it to 1,000 people, repeat. And now we're just seeing that on, now it's just YouTube, right? And it's a e-course or whatever. A lot of them. I'm sure there's good stuff out there, but that's a pretty watered down industry in itself too.
Yeah. So anyway, props to PY1 in Montreal for gracing me with your advertising.
There we go. That's good. And now for the shout out, free tickets. We will email you our business address in Edmonton.
There you go. There we go. I talked about you. Give me tickets. Sounds good.
Influencer marketing logic. Hey, I have 100 followers. Can you let me stay at your hotel for free, please?
181 on Instagram. It's got to be worth something. So free tickets.
Yeah. I don't mean to brag, but that's good. All right. Well, this is, I think we should call it an episode here. Hey?
Yeah. Let's sign off. Follow us
right.
on the Facebook, the Instagram, you can find us anywhere you find your favorite podcast, SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts. I always do that. Google Play.
Yeah. And then, every Tuesday live stream on YouTube, and every Wednesday morning, we drop the actual audio, release of the episode for your listening pleasure there.
Grace your earlobes with our voices.
Alrighty. Till next week.
Keep it long and hard. Peace.
Always hard.